This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and I'm with Anne Milton, the former MP for Guildford, to talk to her about the current situation with the general election and her predictions of what might happen. Anne, thank you very much for giving your time to the Guildford Dragon today to talk about your insight into the election situation. This is the first election you haven't contested since 2005, is that correct?
That's right, Martin. Actually, it's very nice to be in a comfy chair and not fighting elections.
So you're not missing the activity?
I'm not missing it. I'm quite enjoying watching what's going on.
Okay, now last time it was quite a close race between the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, and the Lib Dems reduced the majority to just over 3,000, but 4,000 people voted for you. Now, where do you think those votes are going to go this time round?
Well, I think the mistake to make is that votes just sort of move en masse one way or the other. Actually, if you look at the candidates' existing votes in 2019, some of those might well move as well. I've got some idea why people voted for me. What they'll do in this general election, I don't know. And I think quite a lot of people supported me because they felt I'd taken a principled stance. Some of it was a personal vote. They liked me as an MP. Essentially, they're people who weren't so much bothered about the political parties as the candidate who represented them. So who knows, Martin? And of course, there are big boundary changes, so very different constituency than the one that I was fighting for in 2019.
Yes, so you don't think they're going to go en bloc to any particular candidate? It'll depend on the individual's judgment as to who's the best candidate for them?
Absolutely, and if you look at the 14 years that I was an MP, I won the seat from the Liberal Democrats in 2005 by 347 votes. My majority in 2015 was 22,000. I think 17,000 in 2017. So there's quite a sort of volatile vote in Guildford. So I think you'll find a movement all over the place.
Yes. Now, I've always thought that Surrey, in fact, is not as true blue as a lot of people think it is. Because actually, although Conservatives normally win every constituency, they don't always get over 50% even of the vote. But this time around in particular, it seems to be that we've got a lot of marginals in Surrey.
Well, politics has changed a lot over the last 10 years, I'd say, actually. And so, yeah, I think, I've always said there's no such thing as a safe seat. And when the tide turns, the tide turns. So people will decide how they vote, I think, on two main factors. One is the candidate, so they want to have a good constituency MP, and that might well decide their vote. And the other factor that comes into it is whether they want a change of government. So if you want a change of government, you might vote tactically. But people will have to weigh up those two things, and it can be quite hard. But it's why there is no such thing as a safe seat, because if the tide turns against you, big majorities, 20,000 majorities, can be overturned, irrespective of how good the candidate is.
Now, you talked about the tide. It definitely looks as if it has turned. And do you think that individual candidates, however good their track record locally, do you think that they're just subject to the tide the same as everyone else?
Well, they are subject to the tide, absolutely. But I would suggest that we don't yet know how strong that tide is going to be. So the polls are definitely favouring the Labour Party, and they've been up in the polls for a long time now. In other words, consistently up in the polls. I would expect that to narrow, and we've still got 5 odd weeks of the campaign left. So at the moment, the candidates would be wise to be doing all they can do to get the votes. 2 weeks out from a general election, about the time that postal votes go out, I think it will be clearer what direction that swing is going in.
Right. But do you expect the margin between Labour and Conservatives to narrow as July the 4th approaches?
I would expect it will narrow, yes, for sure. The big question is how much that will narrow. The manifestos aren't out yet. That will be a big moment for both political parties. there are some announcements trickling out now, but that will be an important moment. And I think the polls after those manifestos are launched will be quite significant in terms of predicting the end results.
And how much do you think people will be voting because of what they see as a poor track record of the Conservatives, and how much because they're in favour of Labour policies?
Well, the accepted wisdom is that people vote out governments, they don't always vote for them. And I think that is probably as true today as ever it was. I mean, there is a danger in voting in somebody new, so the change message is quite powerful, but there's also a health warning, if you like, on it as well, because do you know what you're getting? So it's a mixture of things, but it'll be a very interesting election. And as I say, in Surrey, there have been some very big boundary changes. We've got a lot of Conservative MPs standing down, so Surrey's going to be a hotbed of activity.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot now. Who's going to win and by how many seats?
Oh, Martin, no, I couldn't predict. I suspect Keir Starmer will be the next Prime Minister. By how much is open to question. So I think the Liberal Democrats may well end up being an important party in the next general election. Predictions for them, although their poll ratings don't show it, the predictions of them for them are that they might get 40 or 50 seats, not just in Surrey, but elsewhere around the country. So they might well be kingmakers. I doubt if they'll ever go into coalition, but they might be an important part of the next government.
Milton, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.